Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at 1994 and 1995 Pinnacle baseball cards. 94 and 95 were an in-between year for Pinnacle. When they started in 1991, they began a tradition of using the exact same card design between all three sports. Football and hockey in the first year, and then football, hockey, and baseball in the subsequent years. So it didn't matter if it was 91, 92, or 93. Whatever card you looked at across the year, all sports looked the same. The inserts might be a bit different, but the actual cards in the sets looked the same. And then in 1994, interestingly, they decided to change that up so that every single sport looked different. And it's interesting to be able to see how they thought of the different sports in different ways in terms of putting the cards together. They did follow some similar rules, but it's a fun process they went through creating these different ideas. And for baseball, they got very, very, very simplistic. So 1994 was the year when everybody lost their minds, got rid of the borders, and threw a bunch of gold foil on their cards, as in everybody did that. There are almost no examples where that didn't happen. And for Pinnacle in baseball, they went with a full bleed card with just a little bit of a banner coming off, kind of floating, and then a semicircular design element. And then other than the Pinnacle logo floating up in the card, there was nothing else. And the simplicity of the card, there was a good reason for that, which I'll get to in a minute. But otherwise, it was pretty lackluster. This looked more like the kind of thing you would buy in a standalone card set, not as a main release card. The backs were also very simplistic, but that made a little bit more sense. The prospect cards, the only difference for the prospect cards was that they have in gold foil rookie prospects. And well, frankly, when you get to the draft pick cards were done the same way. It just says draft picks. That's all there is to it. So the cards, the simplicity of the set was a pretty bold move. And they also, interestingly, did not do any subsets. So they got rid of that, which was also a mainstay of the first 3 years. But this card set was not really about the main cards as much as it was about the parallels. They started doing parallels in 1994, and they did 2 in baseball. So for those of us over in football, they only did 1 parallel, but in baseball they did do 2 parallels. The first parallel is Museum Collection, and Museum Collection is just gorgeous. The cards have a Dufex finish over the surface, and Dufex is just the brand name that Pinnacle used for their brushed metal effect. But the particular way that they approached it with Dufex is just exquisite, just really fine. And the fine effect of the brushed metal is reflected throughout the cards. So these cards really do have a very impressive satiny finish that makes this card set really fun to pursue. The parallel is fun to pursue. And just in case you didn't figure it out by looking at the card front, on the card back they do have a little logo that says Museum Collection, so you're good either way. But like I said, there was another parallel, and for 1994 they did release an artist-proof version of the main cards. So the card is identical to the main cards in the set, with the exception that they have a little floating gold foil logo that says artist proof. And is it underwhelming? Yes. Is it easy to overlook? It's somewhat easy to overlook. But it was a harder parallel to pursue, so there was that, and we did enjoy pursuing it. And there was one additional element to talk about with this card set, which is that a couple of the Museum Collection cards were not featured in packs. They were released later on through a redemption process where in packs they had replacement cards that look like promo cards. These cards have a wonderful Dufex finish on them, and on the card back they have a particular number, so there's a particular card that is withdrawn that is replaced by this card. So this is a card to send away and get the card, and obviously now in packs this is the card you're going to run into, not the redemption cards. But this really does make me look and go, man, why didn't they use Dufex to make header cards for like all their sets? I love the way that these cards look. I like these better than the cards that they were redeemed for. But at any rate, this was the only other thing they did with the set. But like I said, they didn't do any subsets, so that was all that we had for the cards. But they did do an SP card, and SP cards were pretty rare at this point, so it was cool that they added it in. This is a Super Rookies card for Carlos Delgado, and it is a mirrored chrome finish with 4 pictures of Carlos in different colors, and that's what it is. But it is fun to have an SP card that pops up in packs. It's just, it really was kind of a fun element to run into and something to kind of chase. Otherwise, it came down to the inserts, and it also came down to some standalone sets that you would buy independently in stores. So for inserts, they had their Team Pinnacle cards. And Team Pinnacle, this was a mainstay for Pinnacle, and the design for the 1994 baseball set is just wonderful. They didn't use stipple art, they used a more expressive form of art, which just makes these cards look gorgeous. Otherwise, the design is very similar to the 1992 design, where they have a 3/4 bleed and they have a banner down, or they have a whole strip down at the bottom to anchor it. The big difference, other than the art, is the fact that they do have a gold foil logo that is right in the middle of the card down at the bottom. Again, they have NL on one side and they have AL on the other side, so they continued to follow that model for these cards. But these cards do look really impressive. And like with 1993, they also did an all-rookie Pinnacle team. And these cards these do actually use the stipple art, so the art isn't quite as expressive, still quite nice, and AL, NL, the whole thing that you would expect. So the big difference here is you got to look at the gold foil logo and see whether it has rookie on the logo or not. So that was Team Pinnacle. Then they also had an insert set called the Run Creators. And the Run Creators is a set that is a more sought after card than the design is justified in having. This is a card where they have, it's essentially like a silhouetted player in a way. And on the back, the big interest is there's kind of a gold foil text for the runs created statistic, which is a nice little addition. But at any rate, it is a card that is essentially more valuable than it looks. And then they also had a set called Tribute. And Tribute is a card that looks more like it would be a 1 per jumbo kind of a release. I mean, they're nice enough cards, but they don't really have much of an allure to them, much of a draw. So, another insert set that they created. Or more correctly, the other insert set that they created. They just didn't do much in 1994. But they did continue their tradition of having standalone sets that would be sold separately. And the first set is the Naturals, and the Naturals is a set that was done in a box that's nicer than it looks like. These were sold retail, so they're kind of gaudy, but in this case, the box, if you open it up, it's still felt lined inside, which is nice. It also comes with a certificate of authenticity, which is not nearly as rare as we'd like to think now, but it did come with one. And then the set itself, the cards are exquisite and a little too bold. They have essentially cut out shots of players with a yellow effect on the back with a wonderful Dufex treatment that has kind of the watered down steps effect behind the player, but the whole way that this card looks is just electric and magnificent and yellow, very, very, very yellow. And that's the only thing that I say that I think really holds this card back. And then they also had 2 other sets that were in more simplistic boxes. I mean, very, very simple boxes. Just some card stuff in a box. The first set was New Generations. And this is young players on a very simplistic card with some gold foil. They also did another set that was called Power Surge. And this is not necessarily new players on simplistic cards with a lot of, or some gold foil on it. And they're just kind of churned out, but that was the other 2 sets that they did for 1994. And then that was 1994. That's all they did. They still weren't quite ready to ramp things up, but, well, it's 95 and that's over now. So we no longer would have the standalone sets sold in shops the way that we'd had in the previous couple of years. Now we'd be just getting stuff out of packs. It would be much more straightforward, and we would be getting more stuff as a result. So the 1995 design for Pinnacle's baseball release was inspired by the football release, which is not necessarily where you want to be taking inspiration from. The cards at the bottom have a big gold field that's a baseball stitch swirl kind of effect into a really cool brushed metal logo. I love the way that the logo for the team is on the card. I think that's cool. Otherwise, the card, yeah, just not so much. But again, this card set was designed for the museum collection parallels. And when you look at that, okay, now we're having a conversation. Now all that design work at the bottom looks fantastic, just really works well. And I think that the images themselves, the way that the brushed metal is approached on these cards is a little bit better. See, back in 1994, they had a starburst effect coming out of the logo, the Pinnacle logo, which is a cool idea, but it's a little bit on the nose. In 1995, they have these echoes, these waves that come out that have a whole different feel that just looks a lot better. I think it makes the whole card better, but there's also a little bit more care put into these cards as well. So the 95 Museum Collection cards just look fantastic. Fortunately, they also would make a change with their artist proof, where now the cards have a pewter effect instead of gold for all of the gold foil. It also still has the little banner or the little box that says artist proof, but now it's very distinct. You can absolutely tell the difference. Does it look better? No, but at least it looks distinct. So that's a big help for these cards. And for the prospects cards now are actually looking different. They have a torn paper effect and they have a wonderful rich green color inside of it, which makes these cards look very distinct and very special. And then they also have a special logo down at the bottom for rookie prospects, making these cards just a fantastic design to celebrate these young players. It's about time that they did something different. But if you think these are nice, check out the draft pick cards, because the draft pick cards, instead of having the deep green, it has a deep red, which just looks so much better. So now we actually have distinct looking rookies and prospects that look like the celebrations they're supposed to be. So thank you for that. And then they also added a subset called Swingmen. And the background is it's a weird choice. That whole swirl effect just looks dumb. I mean, I do like the text down at the bottom. That looks really cool, but the swirl effect looks dumb until you realize that, well, actually they designed this card entirely around the Dufex version. And when you look at the Museum Collection parallel, okay, now this makes perfect sense. And actually it's really cool. They're having fun with the technology. They're playing around with it. So kudos to them for that. But that was the other thing that they did in the set. They also did have a couple of cards that they did not include in packs, and so once again in 1995 they also had redemption cards to send away to get those additional cards. So that was a repeat of what they had done in 1994. And that was 95 for the main set. They did have a fair number of inserts though, and so there's actually quite a bit to go through. The first insert set is called ETA, and this is some young players who were excited to see how they're going to be progressing. The card background effect is kind of a bland one, and with the gold foil on it, unless you get the right light to really shine on the gold foil, it disappears into the cards. So this is a card that is an idea that just never quite works. It's when you play around with a card and you get the light moving around, it can be kind of cool to explore it, but otherwise it's kind of a dud, and it looks like a two front card. It's not. The front and the back have different designs, but they do look kind of like the same. So understand, it's not a two front card, even though it does look like one. And then they have their Gate Attractions cards, and this is a mirror chrome finish card. And it looks like it should be in score. This is the kind of thing that when you got a lot of stuff to do and you're running out of ideas, you just pump this out. I wish they had released this in score, but it looks like a score card that just happened to end up in Pinnacle packs with a Pinnacle logo on it. It really doesn't fit. It doesn't have any interest, and that's what I wish that it had. But if you want to see a card that has interest, then move on to New Blood in this card has some texturing on it, and that makes the card really interesting. This is when inserts get fun, when there's something about the card that just pulls you in and gets you fascinated with exploring the card. It's a bold card, there's a lot of color behind the player, but the whole texturing effect of the card is really a cool element that makes this card stand out, and it helps to make the experience of the whole year of 1995 Pinnacle, it makes it a lot more fun. So now that we've got that rush, let's pull it back because we also have Pinnacle Performers. And Pinnacle Performers is a mirror chrome finish with some gold foil in it, and once again, it's just kind of there. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a lot of allure to it, but whatever. We have some hits and we have some misses, and when you get a miss, it's time for a hit. And fortunately for us, we got one coming up of Red Hot. Now, Red Hot is a really cool card. And if you're thinking it should be Red Hot Rookies, well, that's kind of part of the thrill of it, is whenever I look at this, I think about the early 90s Red Hot Rookies by Score. This card very much has that energy to it, but unlike the Red Hot Rookies earlier on, this card has a great look to it. It has a chrome finish to it, which is a nice looking chrome finish, and the whole flames effect behind the player just looks great. The blocking on the side is great. The way this card was built, the card looks really good. And on the card back, I still can't place what it reminds me of, but it looks fantastic. And so this is one of those insert sets that you look at and go, see, they nailed it. But even better, they have a parallel of this. These are the Red Hot cards, but what about the White Hot cards? Same cards, perfect parallel of all the cards, but these are done with blue and with Dufex. And so that means that now those flames, the red flames are now blue flames that actually have movement to them. The way the card looks is just really exquisite. Gorgeous, gorgeous cards. And the back has a metallic chrome finish, which has a very different feel, which is a lot of fun. It's cool to look at this card front and back. They really nailed this one. They absolutely figured out a way to take something that was really good and make it way better. So lots of fun. And then they have their Team Pinnacle. And the Team Pinnacle, I got to talk a little bit about this because this is a card where they have some angled kind of a flame effect on it, on a chrome finish with a team logo, with a player in front of it, and it looks nice enough. But on the other side, it has Dufex. Everything on the card is in Dufex. But they also have another version of the card where everything is inverted. So the Dufex is on the front and the chrome is on the back. So every single card has two players, one on one side, one on the other, as Team Pinnacle cards are wont to do. But every single player gets a Dufex card, and every single player also gets a chrome finish card. There are two versions of every card. Now, the reason I have to distinguish this is the fact that in 1994 in football, they had a different design, but they had the same approach. So every Team Pinnacle card in 1994 in football had two versions of the card, depending on where the Dufex was. But in 1995, in football, they did have the same design as with baseball, but they did not put the Dufex on both sides. For football, it was only on one side in 1995, but in baseball, it is on either side in the Team Pinnacles. So there are two versions of every one of these cards. I do have to distinguish that because it can kind of throw you off. And then the last insert set that they did is called Upstarts. And this is a mirror chrome finish, and it's I don't even want to talk about it. It's there. Yeah, it's there. They also started to sponsor the Fan Fest, the All-Star Game Fan Fest. And with this, they sent out packs with Fan Fest cards in it. These cards do look like afterthought cards. I get what they were doing with the gold foil baseball diamond effect on it, but still, it looks like the kind of thing that you just kind of put off on the side and you don't really worry about it. But these were cards they did in '95 that you may run into. But to go back to the packs for a second, they did have one other insert, and that was for pin redemption cards. Every single card that they sent these redemption cards out, on it, it has an image of a pin, a lapel pin. And if you sent it in, you got the lapel pin, the same pattern, you get the lapel pin of that player. So these redemption cards now are obviously all we're going to get, but what you got back was the lapel pin itself. Now, this isn't the first time they did that, because actually in 1994 they did do team pins. And these were sold in stores in blister packs where they had a team logo pin, but they also had a card down below in each one of these packs. And the card is a card that looks at each team. So every team had one. And the card had multiple logos of the team on the front, and on the back it had a write-up about the history of the team. So in 1994, they had store-released pins for teams that had a team history. In 1995, in packs, they had redemption cards for player pins that you send in and then you got back the pin. So that's the difference between them. And that was 1994 and 1995. That's what they did. We would have 3 more years of Pinnacle after this in baseball. I'm going to obviously look at those separately, but for 1994, 1995, this was that interim year when they were kind of feeling things out before the 1996 chaotic year, which is a whole, I don't want to get into that here. So definitely, if you haven't gone back and watched the 92 and 93 video for Pinnacle Baseball, I have done that. And I will be getting to 96 and 97 and 98. I'll be doing that in future videos, so definitely check for that. So if you haven't subscribed, definitely subscribe and ring the bell to be notified so you know when these videos are coming up. And thank you very much for watching.